Start with you, Vaush. Should the U.S. continue funding this war? And then we'll go to Dave on the same question. But go ahead first, Vaush.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the idea on a systemic level of rewarding Russia for invading a neighbor. I just think, generally speaking, that's bad for global relations, very destabilizing. I think it's important that we support any system that prevents that from happening. And not
because allowing Russia to invade a neighbor would be destabilizing. I think that's defensible.
Exactly a novel position. With regards to the recent development and strikes inside Russian territory, I actually think that this is, in the long run, going to be a good move for peace, just because the previous U.S. doctrine, which seemed to be provide just enough weapons to stall the war, but not like decisively conclude it, I think that was actually like the worst possible position. You know, if Russia did sort of like early conquest, or if Ukraine decisively held its territory, those both end the war relatively quickly. But just interminably stalling it right at the river, you know, I don't think that would have been good in the long run. Hopefully, these increased attacks inside Russian territory, mostly, of course, the refineries that they're using to sort of gin up their war economy. Hopefully, that serves as an effective long-term deterrent. I don't want this conflict to continue. I don't want civilians to die.
Guess Dave's positions. Okay, hold on, wait. When we watch the views from now on,
I mean,
since views, when we watch debates from now on, I need to have like a notepad thing, so we just take notes so that when we watch these debates, since these people will never talk to us, it's good to just be able to spit out talking points against these fucking losers when they're on other platforms. And people should be spamming these talking points because these people will never defend or be able to defend the dumb shit they say. What are Dave's talking points going to be? If I had to guess. We'll just write down some guesses. Ukrainians are dying. We need a peaceful off-ramp. Ukraine is losing / can never win the war. Something, those three or something. Oh, and something about World War III. That would be my guess. We'll see what he says. Oh, maybe something about, we're loading this up way too much. Russia started because of NATO aggression. It's always something, some combination of those dumb points.
Obviously, we'll have to see how things play out.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, of course, we should stop funding this. We never should have been funding this war to begin with. I think that in the original Cold War, which I still regard as one of the worst U.S. policies in modern American history, that did so much to ruin our country, and not to mention, you know, like things like the Vietnam War and the millions of people who died in it. But at least in the original Cold War, I think there was always a healthy respect for the risks involved. And that all of us all sane people should recognize that the greatest priority in human history is that the United States of America and Russia do not go to war. And this was something that people in the old Cold War were very respectful of and aware of. The difference in this new Cold War environment is that no one in the upper echelons of power in America seems to have any respect for this threat, and any respect for, you know, you could think to yourself, well, maybe this will work out in a positive way, that the U.S. is green-lighting attacks inside of Russia. Or perhaps it could be an absolute disaster. And we're playing with, when I say we're playing with fire, it's an understatement. We're flirting with potentially the most disastrous thing that could happen to the human species. If America is to have any role in this conflict, it should be working toward a peaceful negotiation. And in fact, the American role and the Western role has been to kill peaceful negotiations from the beginning of this war and to prolong the fighting. I think that, as John Mearsheimer said back in 2014, the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path, has turned out to be the most accurate prediction on this entire conflict. And essentially, I think since the fall of the Soviet Union, American foreign policy, and just keep in mind, American foreign policy in the Clinton administration and in the W. Bush administration and Obama's administration, these are the same people who are in charge of the Middle East. And in fact, the neoconservatives were very focused on NATO expansion back in the 90s. You can go read the Project for a New American Century documents. And the same people who totally blundered foreign policy in the Middle East have totally blundered foreign policy in Europe, provoking Vladimir Putin and the Russians at every turn, leading to this awful place that we're in. That is certainly, if you care about the Ukrainians at all, has been more of a disaster for the Ukrainian people than anyone else.
Yeah.
And Dave, Vaush.
Okay, so I think we had the Ukrainians are dying. America should only be negotiating peace, like the peaceful off-ramp. He didn't say Ukraine is losing or can never win the war. We didn't hit that one. And then the World War III one, and then Russia started because of NATO aggression. We provoked them, basically. Okay. Geez, what do we have? So many different stupid claims here. He says we should have never been funding the war to begin with. Opposes the U.S. doing. Was he implying that we shouldn't have been involved in the Cold War at all? Or what I don't even understand what the Cold War statement is there. Dave Smith like flirts with this weird libertarian position where he becomes like this hardcore isolationist, or is opposed to literally all sorts of foreign intervention. I guess that's just like his position through all of human history. Let's see. He says no one in the United States has any respect for going to war with Russia. Is this despite the pretty clear lines that Biden drew for not actually sending troops or anything to Ukraine? So that doesn't seem to be true. America's only engagement with this war should be to negotiate peace. That's a patently stupid claim. The United States has a whole host of options available to it. I don't know why the only thing we would be doing is begging Russia for peace when Russia is invading Ukraine. I don't know what would we say to them. Please stop. Claims that, especially if you're going to source Mearsheimer here, aren't we all about realpolitik? Why the fuck would you listen to somebody negotiating peace if you're not willing to back it up with any kind of force? And then claims that everyone else provoked Russia into invading Ukraine. That just doesn't line up with any of the timelines. There were no, 2014, the invasion happened because Yanukovych fled. In 2022, I mean, they invaded as the Southeast shit in the Donbass, continue to rage on. And I don't know if Ukraine was close to closing that out or if that was still like drawing out or not. But like the idea that there is no, what is the provocation from the West? What do you say here? I don't know how I want to structure this yet. We'll just keep going, I guess.
Vaush made a point that I think you hear a lot from defenders of U.S. support for the Ukrainian war, and that is you can't allow other countries, you can't reward other countries for invading other countries. You just can't do that. We can't have that. What's the response to that? We can't have that argument.
Well, I mean,
you can't reward countries for invading other countries. What's the response to that? It's a decent question. Dave.
What's the response to that? We can't have that argument.
Well, I mean, first, I would just point out how absurd it is that after the last 20 years of terror wars, somehow the United States of America still gets to put itself in the position of global peacemaker.
Begins the answer with strange Iraq, PTSD, whataboutism, vaguely notions towards America's wars, implying that the U.S. has absolutely no role to play in world affairs, I guess. Stupid.
As if our major concern is that bigger nations can bully smaller nations. I mean, over the last 20 years, there's been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America.
Do I have color? Let's see. I should highlight huge lies. Over the last 20 years, there has been no greater purveyor of violence than the United States of America. Is it Alt-C for color? What is the total amount of lives lost? Hold on, I'm sorry, real quick in YouTube chat. I love Destiny ignoring his point by calling it PTSD. The reason why I call it PTSD is because there's a branch of incredibly fucking retarded Americans that cannot see any foreign policy decision without immediately bringing up the Iraq war. That's why I call it Iraq PTSD. It is a morally bankrupt and intellectually deficient position. It's morally bankrupt because the fact that we made one mistake in Iraq and Afghanistan doesn't preclude us from ever participating in world affairs again, number one. And number two, it's intellectually bankrupt because comparing every single conflict to that of Iraq is fucking retarded. Ukraine and Russia have absolutely nothing in common with Iraq and Afghanistan. We have very good reason to defend Ukraine. It is a sovereign state that is being invaded by another sovereign state for no good reason. The invasion into Iraq was questionable if you were being the most charitable and downright insane